is that we can clarify items that might not be clear right off the bat because they are discipline specific. And I think this is an important part of the process. I always appreciate it when somebody can enlighten. For me, if something appears a little bit off in professional attainment from a person coming from Christian studies, I have some prior work in the sciences, because somebody else comes from nursing or comes from visual and performing arts, then that representative on the committee for you can provide some clarity. What does it take to be deemed professional attainment in that area? And sometimes that's a quite easy process because we're all in agreement. We take it very seriously if some people raise red flags. We realize this is people's lives that are at stake. And so I want you to know we're very thorough. Sometimes we think there's some mythology that everybody just gets passed up, and that's absolutely not the case. There's some tough discussions that go on in that room. What we really typically look for is red flags. And this being a teaching institution, we take teaching very seriously, teaching effectiveness, but it's very broad. It's not just your evaluation. Especially since we're fellow teachers. We know that we don't just want to be turned into numbers. So we look at a complete picture, and we want to see it warts and all. You don't want to raise suspicion, so don't leave evaluations out because it's not a strong evaluation. We actually want to see those, and then we want to see what you did with that. Did you improve from that? What measures did you take? That is actually something that we value very highly. Because I know for myself, there were times when I took a little dip, and what did I do with that? That's a strong teacher, right? The one that comes back from that. So we go through everything. If we have questions in the past, we have gone outside the committee and gathered information. Now we're not Sherlock Holmes. This is really when the committee cannot reach an agreement. We may go and very discreetly ask for some further information. And this is only when we cannot come to agreement and we don't want to give a negative recommendation unless we must. We are only a recommending body. So in the very end, what we do is we give a recommendation. It's not necessarily a yay or nay. It might be 5 yays, 2 nays, and give them some insight. I wonder if y'all want to comment on that.
Yeah, I was chairman of the committee 3 or 4 years ago, and that was pretty much the process that we went through then. The main difference at that time between what we did then and what Renate just described is the way we got the materials. It was in binders, and sometimes a small binder and sometimes enormous sets of binders. And I think now we've kind of standardized it a little bit. I think part of the problem with that was I think people applying for tenure weren't really sure what was necessary to be a part of that. So that led to Dr. Oldham, the provost at the time, calling an ad hoc committee together the following year, the year after I went off the Promotion and Tenure Committee, of faculty to kind of redo the tenure requirements and the 2 faculty handbook sections that describe that. We also added a number of other documents, including academic portfolio recommendations, which I think you probably are aware of, and they're available on the Academic Affairs My Courses My Campus site. And you can look at those and see what types of things we're looking for. But as Renate mentioned, part of the problem that we have is we have such a breadth of teaching fields that what is evidence of teaching effectiveness in one field may not necessarily be good evidence in another teaching field. And we have to take that into account as we look at it. But we're aware of that, and we try to make that as clear as we can.
Not much to add. One thing, in the times when we've gone somewhere else and asked people, that has consistently been the dean that we've gone to. Just in terms of that, it's not necessarily that we're going to go ask a bunch of faculty members what they think is. In fact, I can't even imagine doing that. the committee that Joey mentioned came up with a set of things that are kind of part of the portfolio. And that's been, I think that, if you kind of look at that, is really helpful in terms of knowing what to look for. There's going to be, everybody's going to do it a little differently, I think, even with that nice little list. But I think, I know I look at the narrative that you give very carefully, because to me that says a lot. I'm interested in what your teaching philosophy is. I'm interested in where you see your growth having come. If you had a really bad evaluation, how did you respond to that? And it may be that occasionally your response is, I had a lousy class. But most of the time, there probably is something that you can learn from it and something that you can grow out of. And so that is more important than did you get a 4.2 or a 4.3 or whatever on the evaluation. But it's where you're growing out of it.
And I like that he mentions narrative. That really helps. And so in the academic portfolio content ideas form that Joey is mentioning here, it really highlights now that we like to see the commentary on what you submit. We used to get a lot of stuff, or we got thin binders, like less is more. But it turned out to be a lot of stuff, and you wondered, okay, why is this in here? And most helpful part is if we can find out why you think this is important to be in here. What is this showing? Why do you think this shows teaching effectiveness? Why is this important to your professional attainment? Okay, so this is research, but how does this research pertain to you being here at UMHB? How is this helpful in your career? What of this do you bring back into your classroom? And how did this help you become a better person in your field, in your discipline? How does this further the research in your field? And how did this help you become a better teacher? And so it's that balance, right? Between when do you submit too little and when do you throw in the kitchen sink? And so one of the things that this committee did and kind of narrowed down was say, give us stuff over the last 3 or 5 years. And some people may just kind of think like, oh my goodness, then I have very little to submit. Well, then tell us why. Because in some fields, we understand it takes a long time to get published in some area or to put on a large play to get that on stage or something. And so that's warranted. And just provide a narrative why it took 4 years to get this particular article in this biology journal. Just provide a short narrative of that. And we still get some people that just get 20 years of articles and it looks a little desperate. Just stand with what you produced and just trust that we realize that is really what you do, because we keep you busy here. We want you to teach much. I think that I've also heard people that worry, well, what if I don't get all 3s in teaching and we get to these numbers? We look at the composite picture and we literally have discussions here. Okay, so we look for trends. Are the trends looking up? If there's a little dip, how did the person come back from the dip? But if it's 3, 3, and then 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, and nothing changes, you start asking what happens. But yeah, of course. I mean, there are little years you do this. Maybe the schedule didn't work out. Maybe suddenly all your classes were at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and they all just had lunch, because we understand we're fellow teachers. So we look for trends. Any specific questions, perhaps? We haven't implemented.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Actually,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the new tenure rule, clarified tenure process that we put into place, this is the first year that will start to apply.
We
Now,
have arrived there.
if you came in under a previous handbook, that would be the process that you would go under. But under this one, if this is your first year, then this will be the situation. But all of these are available on the my campus site, the policies.
Questions?
Can you, and when you ask questions, if you would, please speak loudly. I realize everybody wasn't raised to, master hog calling like I was from Mississippi. But do try and speak as loudly as you can so folks can hear your questions, or if you guys could, repeat them, that would be great. Can you tell us why we go through promotion, the purpose of going through promotion, one semester perhaps, or 1 year, and then tenure at a different time? And what is the difference between those two?
Probably a little unusual compared to some schools. Promotion and tenure here has always been disconnected. I was tenured before I was an associate professor by a couple of years, which would be pretty unusual at University of Texas or somewhere like that. So it's always been disconnected. Now, one of the things that Dr. Oldham kind of pushed for, and I think is being a little bit more clearly clarified, is it's moving more towards being brought together. And if you are up for promotion to associate professor and tenure in the same year, you don't really have to do both. The tenure comes first, and if you get tenure, you'll get the associate professor promotion, right? And so you don't have to actually do that's kind of been that's a shift in that. So that's kind of part of why it's always been seen as being two separate things, and for reasons that are beyond my remembrance, that we are moving towards something that looks probably a little closer to the more traditional model.
When you say the same year, do you mean calendar year or academic year?
Academic year.
Okay, because for example, I'm going up for promotion in February,
Right.
and then tenure in the fall.
Right. Because that would be different.
So
Yeah, that's
it'd still
unusual.
be the two.
That would be two different
Yeah.
processes.
That's exactly what happened with me. I was promoted in the spring, and now my fall tenure materials are due. And
My
in
impression is that we're trying not to be doing that, but
Well,
And there's a new document under review to kind of squash that just a little bit more so that we can synchronize that. We cannot completely always avoid that. If people come in on a parallel track, you come in and you're granted some years.
Right.
But I think the idea is to merge it as much as we can.
Okay.
And that was the issue having to do with the different timelines for promotion and tenure. At least one of the reasons was people come in with a couple of years teaching experience at another institution. In some cases that applied toward their time and rank for promotion, but it didn't apply for tenure, and there was some differences about that. So I think that's why it was done 20 years ago. It was done in a different time frame. But Dr. Oldham and I think Dr. Minot now as the interim provost are very much interested in moving those to a more streamlined, single track kind of application process.
So it goes to how many years are required in teaching experience and how many years we want at the institution before we promote in rank.
So I have a question. Sorry, Claire Phelan. I've been through the tenure and promotion process, which is from assistant to associate. What really interested me was faculty hired prior to 2014 have to serve a minimum of 5 years at the associate's level before they can apply for promotion to full professor. However, if you were hired after that date, it's only 3 years.
Yeah, so the question is what's the difference now that in promoting from associate to full? Is that your
Right.
question? It used to be 5 and now it's becoming 3.
But if you were hired before 2014, it's still 5. So some people are going to only have to do 3, and other people are going to have to do 5.
Yes,
That
so-
doesn't seem to be.
Well, sometimes grandfather rule works out better the other way around. So grandfather rules have the pros and the cons. But the total will remain the same. Total
Right, but
length.
why was it changed? Because it seems that it's not particularly a particularly fair system if some people have to do 5 years and other people can get promoted after 3 years.
Yeah, I have no answer for that. I'm not about the fairness.
Does
I
anyone
think what
know
they
what
try to
has
do
changed?
is, I think at this point, they try to streamline, because I had a conversation, mine had sent me the document ahead of time and we had some questions. they sent us a document, and they're trying to streamline it with other institutions. And so the gap used to be so big, and so people came in under that particular rule, and so we're changing it. But it's kind of coming in on their own catalog, academic catalog, it's switching to another catalog. And that's the best explanation that I can give. So I think we're going 6 and 3 now, or 5 and 3. And it used to be 6 and 5. So in the end, the total years taught will be the same. That we're breaking it up in different years. And the only thing that's changing is we are aligning it with our sister schools.
How can it be the same if it's 6 and 5 or 6 and 3?
It's actually shifted only 1 year, because it's
Yeah.
actually 4, not 3.
I'm just reading it here.
But, well, that's not,
The
but
one
what it
that's on the
says
review?
is at least 3 years at UMHB, but it also says 4 years as an associate
What
professor.
page are you
Are we
on?
also looking at the one on the review for 30 days?
This is on page 2 at the very top of the promotion and rank document from
Okay.
the website.
So either way, it's
Are you looking
it's
for
a
It is a
longer
year
time
change.
now.
I don't remember that conversation when this committee did it. I don't remember any conversation
But
that
I-
would have changed
I-
those numbers.
My 2 cents.
I agree that if somebody's been here a shorter amount of time, they don't have to be an associate for as long. Although if somebody's been here longer, has to be longer, that doesn't quite make sense.
We both have to be
Yeah.
here for 6 years, but I'll have to do 4 years as an associate, whereas somebody who comes after 2014. I understand what you mean about being here in the moment for that amount of time.
Yes, yes. Yeah, I think there's above our pay grades, and I'm so sorry we don't have an answer for that.
Okay, thank you
Yeah.
very much.
Yeah, there's
Thank you.
nothing I can do there. I think in the end it will be fair for more people that come in after us, but but if you want to comment on that, there is that form on there for a 30 days review that deals with promotion and rank, that
Right.
reviews that, and I think that deals with that.
But, you know, I do wonder if something that might have something to do with that is folks there are folks who move around as assistant professors 2 and 3 times.
Right.
Who, if you look at all those years added up, could potentially be anywhere from 10 to 12 years.
I faced that. I mean,
Right.
I came in and I was like, holy cow, I've
Right.
taught how many years now? And I still had to go through the whole thing.
But they may not.
And somebody
Right.
else came in just, fresh out of school and just did these kind of years, and I had to still sit there and do that. And there was a sense of unfairness in there, but you think, well, I came to a different institution, I made a choice. So there's always an element of unfairness in choices you make. But the other thing, I don't know, we don't have anything to do with that as a
All right,
committee.
thanks, Renate.
But it's a good question. Committee questions?
Are there any different considerations for those that are going for the pre-tenure review? Because the list of suggested items is pretty much the same as the tenure. But, I mean, in terms of what needs to be
You're talking about
submitted.
the 3-year
Right.
midpoint, yeah. The purpose of putting that in there was to kind of get a snapshot of where you are at the midpoint of the process going forward. And really, there's essentially no difference. You, obviously, at 3 years, you won't have the record of achievement that you would at 6, but still, the idea is, here's what you're going to have to face in 3 years, so this is what you need to have in place. And certainly, you and your dean, we don't see those. That's between the applicant and
Never
your
comes to the
dean.
committee.
Never comes to the committee. We only see the final application for tenure at the time. But that's designed to help the dean and possibly associate dean and department chair, if they're involved, to get involved with helping a candidate to see where they are in that process. And notably, to note any particular areas that might need to be shored up before they get to that level.
What else is different in the process then, other than not going to your committee?
Well, it's really just a kind of a checkup. It's not really part of the process. We put it in there because we thought it was a good idea. But, and in theory, you could not do that and still apply for tenure. It's not really recommended, but you could do that. It's not part of the tenure application process, but it is strongly recommended that you go through that and that you see where you need to look for areas that you can improve.
I don't think your tenured colleagues write letters at that point.
No, they
like
don't.
we get. So that,
It
that's
really is
different
only the
there.
dean that's involved, or other administrators. The big thing is just trying to catch any problems that are coming up, or to either say, it looks like you're on the right track with this stuff, or to say, you need to strengthen this or this, or that kind of stuff. And that's really the primary goal of it, that none of it comes to the committee at all. It's basically just.
Yeah, that shouldn't be punitive, it should be helpful.
I have a question. Because teaching effectiveness is so highly valued, you know, I think I'm in a little bit of a unique situation. I only teach one course a semester because I have other duties. And of those courses, I've only had one that qualified for the IDEA or any kind of review like that. So what are the various measures that are looked at to evaluate teaching effectiveness aside from, you know, faculty, the course evaluations?
Yes, it actually discusses that in the form. So do you get classroom observations? You can even request that.
Yeah.
Okay. So there are a couple of things. You can request additional classroom observations, peer evaluations, we like those. Other collaborative parts. So when we are aware of that, we actually deal with that with deans.
Mhm.
They only teach one course. Other people would have modified assignments when they have only two. Dr. Eaton herself dealt with that. She has so many responsibilities that she gets to teach very, very little, though she would like to teach more. So then we have to go outside of that to get a more comprehensive picture of that. And so you can assist us by going outside and get some other people to evaluate you. And we just do the best we can, and it's difficult. But we look at the complete picture.
Sorry, certainly the committee is going to take that into account.
Yes.
And that would be part of, when you apply for tenure, that's part of the narrative.
Yes.
One of the, I think, Renate mentioned this a moment ago, is that we used to get these enormous folders, which basically were just sort of a kitchen sink approach. Let's just back a dump truck up to the Promotion and Tenure Committee and just pour the stuff in there. It wasn't even, in some cases, really well organized. It was just kind of things. Whereas what we're looking for is a narrative. Here's why I think I'm a good teacher, and here's why I think I'm an effective professor. Here's what supports that, and you bring that in there. And this one year I had less than great evaluations. Here's what I did with that, and that kind of thing. In your case, it would be, I only teach one course that could be evaluated by IDEA per semester. Here's what happened in that course. Now here's what else I do in teaching, and present that as a narrative, and then the committee will evaluate that basically. We're certainly not looking at certainly not only looking at student evaluations. That is the furthest thing from it. But other peer evaluation, dean or associate dean evaluations, classroom observation, anything that you can think would demonstrate that would be good.
And you can also provide any kind of written feedback that students have given, any emails they send you out of it one class. There's a lot that encompasses that. You know. So you have a lot of freedom in what you want to submit. So there are some people that say, here's some samples of what students say about me. That's my pet peeve, I think. Because suddenly, you know, you're like, I want to meet this person. This is like an amazing teacher. I've never heard of a teacher that only has like glorious things, because I get good evaluations, but I have some students that say nasty things about me. How come that? Just include that. And, you know, it'd be weird if you never have students that say nasty things about you. So it's okay if you say sample, but if you say sample, then I'm expecting to see kind of like a full spectrum, just to make sure you're normal, not an alien. You know, it's so that'll be nice.
But I think, are we expected to submit all of our faculty evaluation, all of our student evaluations?
No.
No, not necessarily.
Okay, with comments, because I guess you know, in my case, I only teach like in the fall, a freshman seminar and then my one course per semester in College of Ed. But I always include all of those. You know, the comments that students have, just so you can see that whole picture and what happens over time. And so I think that's a good, you know, if you feel comfortable doing that, especially if you only teach one course, certainly you do that. And knowing that I only teach one course, I try to get somebody within my college to come and observe, somebody outside of my college to come and observe. So it's a peer review process. So just getting different folks to see that and putting as not just putting all that stuff in there, but referencing it in the narrative. Instead of just loading it.
I would think you would not. You would want to have at least, say, your last 3 years or so. And you, as Renate mentioned earlier, you don't want to leave one out. I mean, you know, if you're giving us 7 evaluations from last year, my question is going to be, why isn't there 8?
Right.
You know, if you taught 8 classes, I'm curious why you left one out.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
so be consistent with, you know, I mean, if you're looking at 6 years, we may not care what happened in the first year, but we're interested in sort of the trends and things of that sort.
There's the portfolio with the ideas suggests that you provide a narrative with a table that summarizes documentation, and then there's room in the appendix to provide the actual ones. And like Marty says, just give the most recent ones, the ones before that you can sample. And there's also this idea, and it makes common sense, right? If there's a well-presented picture, everything is hunky-dory, give us some samples and then give a summary table where you summarize everything from the last. If you think that there's kind of a balancing act going on and then stuff is missing, you're raising red flags. You just don't want to do that. So then just better be safe than sorry. Just put it in there and just provide a narrative. That's really just the best advice.
It would be really important to provide that narrative and that explanation of what's going on, rather than the raw data. Go ahead and make the conclusions for us. That's fine. We'll evaluate that. But just presenting a whole lot of raw data and saying, okay, you slog through this and try to figure out what's going on, that's kind of one of my pet peeves, as opposed to the sampling of comments. Mentioned with the comments, Danny Minot loves to tell the story about how he got a student comment one time, Dr. Minot has destroyed my faith in God. So there you go. Everybody gets that.
So for example, I teach some online courses, and no matter what you do and how hard you try, they tend to trail just a little bit below us. Now, what if you teach 3 online courses and 1 on-ground course? It probably will impact it just a little bit. It's just for the data supports. So you may want to provide the narrative, primarily teach online courses. I still think you can do an excellent job in it, but just provide a little bit of that narrative so that we don't have to go through that. If I go, oh, they're online courses, which we have to do sometimes.
Claire, do you have?
A really quick question. So if I didn't have to do the pre-tenure review or the electronic portfolio, so when I make that application for promotion, do I have the option of still doing a paper application, or do I have to go to the electronic?
So the question is, if at this point somebody has to go from tenure to promotion,
Who didn't have to go?
if she has to redo it all and turn it into electronically, if she can do a paper one, we really want the electronic version.
For the application of promotion, it has to be electronic.
Yes, but you can ask if unless something is sensitive. Unless something is sensitive information,
Okay.
we just encourage using student workers for the non-sensitive material to scan that in.
Okay.
It should lower your load. What it really is if we have a lot of them, we used to have to go to the library and sit there and flip through that. We can honestly do a more thorough job. Having this, it's not laziness, it really is effectiveness. I'm so sorry.
And accessibility.
I have to do the same thing.
Accessibility.
I did a pre-tenure binder last year that's this thick. I copied all this stuff. It's like, okay.
Yes,
Go.
but use students that hopefully can help with that.
And we're in the transitional period now. At some point, it'll all be electronic, but
You're just in a bad period of time, aren't you? Yes, yes.
We'll come
Yes, sir.
Y'all spoke to what you look for, and I found that helpful, but can you give some insight into what are like a couple of things that have more commonly resulted in a negative recommendation, and perhaps historically, about what percent would you say ends up with either a positive or a negative recommendation?
So the question is, what materials result in possibly a negative recommendation? What are the red flags, and what percentage are we looking at? And we'll have to look a little bit historically, which is a little bit sensitive information, but I guess it's more than
Well,
We can talk in general.
yeah, I think we can look in general. Probably the two biggest red flags is if teaching evaluations are just really bad.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you know, I'm relatively cynical about IDEA, you know, so I don't really care if it's 4.4 versus 4.6. I don't, there's no statistical value to that difference, you know, but if it's 2, that's a red flag, right? You know, and so those kind of things would be a red flag. If you just have no publications, I mean, if you've never done, you know, you're not presenting anywhere, you're not doing anything, then there's, now certain areas that might be okay. I'm pretty sure education wouldn't be one of those.
Right.
But, you know, certain areas that might be somewhat okay, but in most areas, that's a red flag. And there was one we thought very carefully about that, because that was pretty well empty, and so there was some concern there, but there were reasons.
And sometimes it's the accumulative. So the teaching is already iffy, which is very problematic. And then on top of that, professional attainment is minimal, or university service is just not there. You start wondering, does the person want to be here? So it can also be the accumulation of it. Is it the whole picture doesn't add up? And we can only give a recommendation. And that doesn't necessarily mean it's unanimous. But you start seeing it, it's not one person who says, I'm not going to do this. We talk through this, and often there's clarification. People come in with a negative feeling about it, but upon clarification, people change and say, I can see how that is so, okay. And that happens more often than what you would think. Most of the time, it clears up in conversation. But these things where you see trends and they never turn around. Person year after year just persists in not changing a tide. Now, when people do get a negative recommendation, looking over the past 3 years I've been on there, there have been given, this is not a guarantee whatsoever, but there have been given opportunities to improve. The university can do that. And these people are guided in their teaching, and they're being given a year of mentorship under which to really improve. These people really want to be here, they really love UMHB, and they're given an opportunity. And there are people that come back, and then the next year they're tenured, and there are people that there's just no improvement. And we have no say in that, but you know, you pretty much, you do it with a heavy, heavy heart. But I also think I have kids that one day are going to come here, and it's an expensive place to come to. And so sometimes it may just be the Lord's leading that they're supposed to be somewhere else. You know, you got to hold the standards.
One thing that I have found in my previous time on the committee is a clear problem like poor evaluations, poor observation results, with no corresponding explanation or narrative to go along with that. It's just kind of there, and there's no attempt to explain what was going on or anything like that. That, like everybody has said, a poor evaluation in one particular area for 1 year is not a red flag necessarily. If you've got a narrative that accompanies it and it goes against a trend and it's clearly an outlier, then that's not a big deal. But to put clearly subpar information in there with no attempt to explain it, this personally happened when I was on the committee at one time, then that's a red flag.
And it's often holistic. I mean, you see a negative trend like that. Inexplicable things are happening, and there's no turn back from it. the dean also gives kind of an iffy, you know, people pick letters of support with pom-poms, but when it comes down to it, you get to the people that really work with these people, they try to say nice things, but you read between the lines. So if it's only the dean, you may think, well, maybe the dean doesn't work all the way close with the person. If it's only the teaching, but in other words, the committee does not take it lightly. These are people's lives. But we also know that you also want to have a standard. You're working hard, and you want to make sure everybody works hard because you're working your tails off.
So you don't make a recommendation, it goes to the provost. The provost makes the ultimate recommendation, I guess, with the president or the board of trustees.
Board of trustees.
The trustees have the final decision, but I can't imagine the provost being overruled.
Right, yeah.
And I do feel they take us seriously. We don't feel like we're just pawns.
So I have a question. One of the good things that I appreciate about promotion and tenure committees is that they have representatives from all the various colleges that are on there. And you guys have kind of alluded to this today in your talks and your discussions about various colleges have various cultures. The culture is different in one college than, say, another. The culture in some colleges might be, you really need to publish. And the culture in another college could be, well, that's not, that's not as big a deal here. So I wanted to ask about that, and when you do that, do you depend on, for instance, if someone is from the School of Business, you depend on Dr. McMahone to say, well, that's not that unusual in this area, and blah, 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 and so they're called upon to speak. I'm guessing you guys do stuff like that?
Absolutely, that's the
Yeah.
reason for the equal representation
Exactly.
of all parts of the institution
Yeah.
on the committee, is so we won't have a whole bunch of people
Yeah.
from one college deciding about someone from a
Mhm.
college they have no knowledge of. So-
Yeah, because I think that needs to be stated. I don't think a lot of people realize and recognize that happens. Some people, for instance, who may not get the favorable outcome that they want to get, may say, well, they just don't understand my area, they don't understand, and my comeback for that is you have representation on the committee who can make the case and try and help to understand.
Yeah, I think you definitely see that, music is a good bit different from business, right? So whoever the music rep is, we're gonna listen to them.
Right.
And certainly. Now, I do think the university has pretty well made it clear that professional attainment is more important than it used to be.
Uh-huh.
We take it very seriously.
And that we're a teaching university and that comes first and all that kind of stuff, but you can't come here and do nothing. Yeah, I mean that's, and so what doing something is may be different in different colleges.
Right.
But if it's not that, it's not that, and that's not good.
Mhm.
And so I think that's pretty clear too.
And we like to say publications, but there's also realizing there are budgetary constraints to too much travel, professional conference travel. I know about that. But, there are some folks, if they can present every year in their area, that's a good thing. That could be weighted as almost as well as the publications. I know I have seen that. And so,
So the counterpoint also happens, where you actually, because it takes of course place behind closed doors, where you say, yeah, I see, but I gotta tell, even though it's my own colleague, if there's no travel money, there's conferences over in Austin, and there's no excuse why this person couldn't.
Right.
So, because you wanna be fair, you wanna be ethical. And so there needs to be equity within diversity of disciplines. And so we take it all into consideration.
but we all, on the tenure track, we all have travel money for at least one conference.
Mhm.
So the expectation is maybe once a year, you can do something scholarly with that, whether that's go to present a paper, attend for a reason, or maybe you don't do it that time, and or maybe you're working to publish or whatever.
But this comes back to the narrative again. write about us. Tell us what was going on. Were you working on a project with students at the same time, and
Right.
that took your time?
Excellent.
Maybe you had an extra administrative load that took your attention of that. It all comes back to that narrative.
It's never a black and white thing. There's
Uh-huh.
always something going on
Yeah.
that we can't know about unless you tell us.
And it's up to us to make the case
Right.
for
Yes.
us.
Sure.
I mean, that's the most important thing we can do then, is make the case and try to do our best to help the committee understand.
Yes, and I think we haven't spoken yet about promotion.
Ah.
We have different expectations when people go from from assistant to associate, and from associate to professor, full
Okay.
professor. And so we're looking simply for, especially like professional attainment, that cranks up just a little bit
Ah.
when you go to full professor. And so that's laid out as well. You can look for this online.
Uh-huh.
It goes from proficient to commendable.
Mhm.
And then you have to decide, what does that mean within people's disciplines?
Yes.
And so when you move in that direction, you want to apply for full professor, that takes some planning. And that also means that 3 years is actually also a little bit more challenging. So the 5 years may give you a little bit more time, because now you have to come up quicker with stuff. Yeah, but I mean, to justify stepping up, because in some disciplines, it takes a long time to be accepted to a journal, or to find a publisher for your stuff, to get a piece of music all the way produced. So it has its pros and cons, and but we look at it in steps. And there as well, it's not common, but people have been held back for a certain promotion, because there's just not quite there. I think it happened last time. It's not quite there.
What do we see in terms of red flags for university service, if anything?
Just not doing anything?
Is that possible?
Yes, it is.
Well, at the minimum, we've gotten applications that didn't show anything.
But,
Now, that doesn't mean that they hadn't actually done anything, but we have gotten applications.
so
where
they haven't
didn't
made a
bother
strong
to
enough
tell us.
case for themselves.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, all faculty are, in the past, have been appointed to committees.
Right.
Okay, so here's where promotion comes in play.
Okay.
Okay, we expect more when people go from associate to full professor. You need to have commendable university service. You need to be proficient when you go from assistant to associate. So proficient looks like you're serving on your committees. You really got to step it up a little bit. Take up on opportunities when you want to become full professor. Show that you really like this place. And
But what do you mean by that, Renate, that you got a commendable? I mean, can you be a little bit more specific, especially in regard to university service?
There isn't, I mean, again, there's not a hard rule,
Right.
but if the only thing a person had ever done was serve on, especially had served on committees that are kind of known to be do-nothing committees, then that would be a little bit of a red flag to me. They've never been on curriculum, they've never been on promotion and tenure, they always seem to manage to get on, student development or on one of the committees that barely ever seems to do anything, although I think student development got stuck here recently.
I've never been put on a
stuff.
committee, I've asked to be put on
Yeah.
since I've been here. So
And we would recognize that
Yeah.
too. And then the other question would be sort of, do you do anything beyond just the once a year being on a committee,
Okay.
I mean,
all right. Yeah.
Well, that's what I was gonna ask.
And some of that's not necessarily under your control either, I recognize.
Okay.
But I mean, taking a more I just wanted to give maybe a suggestion to say if this would suffice in that case. For instance, being active, it's university service, but it's being active at the state level, it's being in your area, it's being active at the national level, perhaps because that is a university service. I mean, anytime you can get the University of Mary Hardin Baylor's name off this campus and connect it, that's a service to this institution.
And one of the things that's mentioned here is service as a university representative at an event or gathering outside the university. That's
Exactly.
important.
Which is exactly what I was
It's
talking
not just serving
about.
on committees and doing things here. That's part of it, but yeah, that can be counted as university service as well.
Yeah, holding an office in a
In
state,
a state or national organization.
yeah.
a task force.
Yeah,
I mean,
sure.
There's so many things that can be done
Committee.
here that it's hard to avoid getting put on them. Isn't that the truth? We just look for something there. And again, even with those things, I think it's more serious when you go up from associate to full professor. But when you're talking about tenure, or when you're talking about lower promotion, there it is. If something else is shaky and that doesn't add up either, now we got a problem.
Right.
It's more the complete picture there then. Now, when you go from associate to professor, you really want to have all your ducks in a row.
One of the things that was part of the discussion in the most recent revision to this was, yeah, and I know Dr. Oldham was pretty heavy on that, but was the idea that getting the promotion to full professor should be a big deal. That for one thing, your career's not on the line. You already have tenure if you're being promoted, if you're looking. So it's not an all or nothing kind of thing. And so, so part of the discussion was you ought to be an exemplary professor to be promoted to full professor, not just that you've served your time.
But you don't necessarily have tenure. For instance, I came in as an associate. I've been promoted to professor, but I don't have tenure yet.
Oh.
Oh,
That puts you in an unusual
that's
position.
very unusual.
Yeah,
We
so
need to
I
talk.
go up for tenure October 15th.
And that could,
So-
in theory, happen with people who have significant service at other institutions before they come to UMHB.
Right.
Because of the rules about time and service at UMHB before you can be promoted. So that might happen in those cases. For somebody who starts here, of course, it's not because of it doesn't work out that way.
Right.
I would say, just the way that this was set up, I would say to somebody, if somebody was asking me about it, I would say be careful about applying to full professor promotion if you're not tenured.
Right.
Because as it's written, if you don't get it,
Right.
you get a terminated contract.
There you go.
Now, that
I'm
wouldn't
not
apply
here.
if you were tenured.
You'll know why.
It wouldn't apply if you were tenured, but it would apply if you weren't tenured.
Right.
I mean, I don't think it's likely, but
Anything is
it'd be
possible.
worth thinking about. If you only have one more year to get tenure, I would wait for the full professor application.
But can you wait?
Yes.
So when you get the message that you're eligible, it does not necessarily mean that you do that.
Right.
Oh, I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah,
I don't think it would have made
And
a
that's-
You
difference.
have to apply for tenure.
It's a critical difference between tenure and promotion. You must apply for tenure when you reach the time in service.
Uh-huh.
You can apply or not apply for promotion as you see fit.
Oh, okay, I didn't know that. That's great to know.
It's generally a good idea to apply for promotion when you meet all of it, except in the unusual situation Marty was talking about.
Uh-huh.
But you don't have to do it.
I did not want to apply for a full professor. I was 2 years away, but I was looking, I knew that at my previous institution because I wanted to move to another institution and it's harder to find a job as a full professor. Now, we don't have
Right.
a job to do that here, but you can hold off. Yeah. Now, as far as tenure, with the mid-review that we have, the halfway review, if you're looking good halfway through and you keep putting forth the work, it will have to be rare when red flags are raised later on. Just keep going as you're going. If you have a positive halfway review, keep working that. I'm very excited that we have put that in at this point. I really think that is something to be celebrated, that the university has put that in place to help you out. And then there's always Lynn that will help you with teaching effectiveness and bringing up those scores and all. My former institution did not have that. So you go up for tenure and suddenly they're saying, well, what about this or that? Well, why didn't you tell me that halfway through I could have improved on that? So I think it's helpful.
If you're in a situation where you are applying for tenure in a couple of years and you came in before the mid-tenure review thing was put into place, I would suggest you go to your dean and your associate dean and say, could we do this? Could we do, I'm sure that they would be happy to help you out with whatever. Let me show you what I've got. Tell me if you see any problems. Even if you don't do it formally, just do it informally.
I think that makes a lot of sense. To me, tenure is kind of like grades at the end of the semester. You really shouldn't be surprised if you're in trouble. And so if, have a conversation with the dean or whatever to have a pretty good idea about that. And they ought to be able to give a pretty good sense. if nothing else, if a dean is saying, I want this person, I'm gonna have a hard time voting no.
Do you always go to the dean?
What do you mean?
Do you always act, so the dean writes?
We always get a letter from
We always
the
get a
dean.
letter.
They get the letter, but, okay, so
We
you're
only-
talking about, when you say about the dean, it's what the dean says in
If
the
the dean's
letter.
written in the letter and said, this is a person I can't afford to lose.
Right.
I'd have a hard time saying, oh, let's not give them tenure.
But sometimes you have to contact the dean even for further clarification or for some additional information perhaps from time to time. I mean, I don't know.
But
It could if you
I
needed
mean,
to.
Does the committee do that?
Yes.
Yeah, we do sometimes.
Yeah, so I thought, sometimes you might need to do that,
But we don't talk about private information other than that.
yeah.
No, and we're sworn to secrecy. We have to actually sign in blood, no, but we do sign a document.
Yeah, say we won't.
Yeah, we'll discuss.
One last question maybe? Anybody? Okay, if not, hey, let's thank the committee for coming and giving us the best that they have to respond to our issues. And I feel a little better about the process now, and I hope you do too. Are you all open to, are you guys open to emails or further questions if folks, for instance, who can't be here but who might see this? Okay, thank you so much. And I hope you'll join us tomorrow when we'll actually have faculty here who have undergone the process, and they will have their materials passed around so you can take a look at those. Okay? Thank you.
And it was, when I